Okay, we're doing the Underground Guide to Study Skills. It's a book about study skills by me, Pete Rogers. It's for any age, junior high, high school, college, even grad school. I'm going to talk real quick about a standardized test, the SAT test, Scholastic Aptitude Test. Junior year of high school, I took it, and I went out the Friday night before, taking it on a Saturday. I could care less about that. That was before I got injured, and I sort of had this attitude, well, I'm going to be, national champion wrestler. What do I care about school? I'm going to eventually become a wrestling coach. I figured I'd get a full scholarship to Iowa. And so I just figured this test is silly. It's another annoying nuisance I have to take for my academic eligibility. So I didn't give it any thought whatsoever. I did reasonably well. Lots of kids at my high school did better than me on the test. And the real question is, why did I even do as well as I did? And I think the reason is because I read a lot on my own. I didn't really like school in high school. I was not an honors student. I never ever took an honors class. I just took regular classes and, tried to get okay enough grades so my parents wouldn't bug me and I could go out on the weekends. But I didn't see anything, there was nothing that drew me to school. I didn't really like school that much. But what I did like is I liked reading. And a lot of my reading was sort of a little contest with my father. I would want to read things to discuss with my father. And I would show you a picture too. I had an uncle. But basically, the more you read, the more your vocabulary grows and the more you can understand. Reading one book leads to another and it makes you smarter. It's the best way to make yourself smarter. It's wonderful to have a mentor, somebody who teaches you and talks to you, but most of us don't have that. My father was a bit of a mentor. You'll find too that if you just read more, your verbal scores will go up. I was always good at spelling and that sort of stuff, and because I read a lot. In grade school, I had a big bookshelf in my room, and I was very proud of having read all the books on the shelf. My father was very poor growing up. He grew up in a house in Ireland with a dirt floor and next to a beer factory, and almost all the boys in his town ended up working in the beer factory. But my dad, he got a scholarship to, he was a valedictorian of his high school, so he got a scholarship to college. My mother, his mother, my father's mother in Ireland, she read a lot, and my dad imitated his mother. I imitated him. Growing up, my dad was always working. I didn't get to see him that much. At night, he would, after working all day, he would take the dog for a walk, and then he'd sit in his bed and he'd read books while he listened to classical music. That's what my father did. And for me, that was the role model of what a man does. He works, makes money for his family, gets up early in the morning, works all day, exercises, and then he reads at night and listens to classical music and Irish music, okay? These are my father's brothers, and they would come over sometimes, and they would argue about books. So that's my dad right here, this guy right here. This guy is his brother. He was an engineer, sort of physicist guy, and he's a real smart guy, but he wasn't smart about nutrition. He died of a heart attack at 51 years of age. He was another physician, psychiatrist, and basically my dad says he was a bit of a bully, the middle guy, the engineer, and so my dad became a boxer so that his older brother couldn't pick on him. And my dad was actually like a national champion of boxing. He's a tough guy. He won a big tournament. So anyways, they would sit there and they'd argue about books. And he in particular, Uncle John, was kind of a crazy uncle and kind of nasty. And he would basically, insult you, call you stupid, say you're, disgusting, you're a moron, you're an idiot, you're a illiterate piece of POS. And so he was real nasty, and I didn't like him. I told my mom, you should not invite this guy to our house. He's nasty to Dad, he's nasty to me, he really doesn't belong in our house. And my mother would say, oh, your father enjoys him. I know he's obnoxious, but your father loves to talk to him about books. We don't take him seriously. And so what I would do, like a typical comment he would make is he'd say something like, what do you know about the war in Nam? You're just a young idiot. Oh, look, the son is as stupid as the father. So that kind of stuff. So I would get pissed off and I would, go to the bookstore with my dad. He'd buy about 10 books. I'd buy about 5 books. And so for the next holiday when Uncle John was coming over, I would want to have read a bunch of books to be ready to argue with him. And because he would do stuff like he'd read a book on Saturday, come over on Sunday, then he'd ask you all these detailed questions about the book. And of course, nobody could answer the questions because we hadn't just read the book. And then he would call you stupid and he'd insult you. But anyways, it was good. I liked going to the bookstore with my dad, and I didn't mind arguing with him. But what I'm trying to say is it was built into me from a young age to read a book and argue about it. And I think that was a good education. It was a better education than my school was. Because when I was reading the book for the purpose of talking with my dad or my uncle, I had a purpose. So the book was meaningful to me rather than just reading some random thing assigned by a teacher. Okay, and my father was like my hero when I was young, so I wanted to read a lot of books and be like him. And I'd read anything. He'd let me read anything, and that was good. I read about a lot of people they developed when they had some time off to just read a lot. Stephen King missed a year of grade school due to illness, and that year he read stacks of comic books, and he wrote his own comic book, and that was a turning point for starting his writing career. It sort of builds a scaffold in your brain of word associations, and that raises your verbal IQ. Okay, and I think that's why, even though I never, took honors classes and wasn't that great a student in high school, I could write well and I could spell well. And then at senior year, I ran on the cross country team, and those guys had all done better on the SAT test than me. And it was like the cross country team was like nerd headquarters, and those guys had scored in the 1400s, the 1300s, and I was a little jealous of them. I would play some games with them, like board games, Monopoly, Stratego, Risk, whatever, and I could hang in there with them. And I'm like, well, gee, maybe I could do better. Why can't I get a high score on the SAT test? So I just bought the book and prepared on my own. The reason I'm telling you this is most students never prepare for it. But just by buying the prep book and I started to study it, plus also I had gotten injured by then, and I no longer was so certain I was going to have a great college wrestling career or I was going to get a full scholarship to a good school. And because of it, I'm like, gosh, I'm going to have to become an academic student like a regular person. And so I started just studying on my own, going through the book. You can buy the book for like $10 and just practicing the word associations, the math questions in there. And I took the SAT test over. My score went way up. Then I took it again. My score went up way, way more. I think my score went up about 270 points, but it was a long time ago. I forget the exact amount. Basically, what did I get? I think I got a 770 on math, and I got something like a 700 or a 730 on English. If I had, and I wasn't a good student at that time. I became a much, much, much better student later. But the point of it all is that you can make a tremendous improvement on a standardized test if you study for it. I mean, that might sound obvious, but what I'm trying to say is they try to pretend that these are IQ tests and they're independent of your study. That's completely untrue. The more you prepare for it, the better you will do. And people are going to judge you by it. They're going to consider it an IQ test, so you might as well study for it. And so that was a big learning lesson for me. You study for those standardized tests. Why not? That gives you a way to compete with people from other places. Somebody else goes to some big fancy prep school, they're going to automatically give them favoritism over you for getting into a competitive college. Well, why not prepare for this test? And that'll give you some increased credibility for getting into the school. So anyways, that's the bottom line is preparation for standardized tests makes a big, big, big difference.